and good evening from London, where the sun is shining. And welcome to my talk. It's the second part in my talk on the Sassoons. In my last talk, I explained how in the 19th century, David Sassoon built a successful commercial trading network from Bombay to China. New communities of Middle Eastern Jews, known as Baghdadi, sprung up in India and in trading posts in the Far East. By the end of the 19th century, several hundred were living and working in Shanghai. And as the Chinese collective noun for all those who worked for the Sassoons was Sassoons, I hope to give you an impression of this extraordinary community in the wider sense. And incidentally, if you want to see the first part of my talk, that was on the 16th of January, and you'll be able to find it on the Lockdown University website. So this gives you an idea of the scope of the Sassoon commercial trading network. David Sassoon, of course, originated in Iraq, in Baghdad, and India was then under British rule. David Sassoon set up in Bombay, in Calcutta, he had branches in Burma, in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and in Shanghai. So David Sassoon's son, Elias, developed the business in Shanghai, and Elias's grandson, the colourful character Sir Victor Sassoon, invested in apartments, factories, and hotels. My talk tonight will primarily focus on the Kaduris, who were rivals to the Sassoons in the Far East, and also I will be talking about Silas Aaron Hardoon, one of the Jews who made his fortune in Shanghai. Both the Sassoons and the Kaduris played an important role in opening up the city to the world between the wars. And with its department stores, its hotels, Shanghai was the fifth largest city in the world. And this is the Shanghai Bund. Shanghai became known as the Paris of the East, or the Tel Aviv of the Orient. By day, it boasted all the trappings of a Western colony: grand mansions and hotels, a race course, a golf course. By night, it was a wicked place with its gambling casinos, its nightclubs and dens of vice. One wag said, "God owes Sodom and Gomorrah an apology if he doesn't destroy Shanghai." Nearly all the Baghdadi Jews had started out in the country in one of Sassoon's companies. And one of these arrivals was Eli Kaduri, who within a few years would become the Sassoon family's greatest business rival. He built two Shanghai landmarks, the Marble Hall and the Majestic Hotel. Modelled on the palace at Versailles, Marble Hall would become the Kaduri's palatial residence. During his 30 years in Shanghai, Eli would make millions. A distant relative of the Sassoons, Kaduri was 15 when he arrived in Hong Kong from Iraq in 1880, and Hong Kong was then a British colony. Eli Kaduri's father had just died, and economic distress prompted his mother to contact the Sassoon family in the hope that they would employ her son. The family took Ellie under its wing and gave him a job as an apprentice clerk in one of its businesses in Hong Kong. In 1914, he accumulated shares in the Hong Kong Hotel Company, the oldest in Asia, and this became the Hong Kong and Shanghai Hotels Limited Company. Ellie was sent to two ports, which China had been forced to open to foreign trade, Weihai Wei and Ningbo. There, the bubonic plague struck. Ellie opened the warehouses he managed in order to dispense disinfectant, even to those who could not afford it. When challenged as to why he did not charge for the disinfectant, Ellie said he would rather resign than not value humanity. Resign he did. After a few years of working in minor jobs, Kadoorie decided to strike out on his own. With 500 Hong Kong dollars in hand, which he borrowed from his older brother, who like him had been sent to China to work with the Sassoons, Ellie adopted the name E.S. Kelly to conceal his Jewish roots, and he established a stock brokerage company with two partners. A significant turning point occurred when he was 32 and married Laura Mokata. She was from an old Sephardi Jewish family in Britain. He brought her with him to Hong Kong. The Mokatas were well known for their philanthropy, and Laura herself was said to be the most liberated woman in Shanghai, driving motor cars, shooting and agitating for men's clubs to open their ranks to women. Laura was also a painter and kept diaries. Laura gave Ellie, who was living in Hong Kong, an entree into the world of London society. They raised their two boys as Britons, from their names, Lawrence and Horace, to their English boarding schools, to the mansion they would buy in London. In 1901, Ellie felt confident enough to change the name of his company to Ellie Kadoorie and Sons. It was also then that he made his best investment in rubber companies in Southeast Asia. His rubber interests extended to Burma, Indonesia and Malaysia, as well as Hong Kong and Shanghai. Rubber was much in demand for tires in the then rapidly growing automobile industry in the United States. From a small trader in stocks, he became a millionaire. By 1910, Ellie had made enough money to retire. He intended to buy a house in London and live the life of Riley, as the Sassoons had done. But he was forced to return to Hong Kong, as he had been told that his partners had gambled or drunk away 9/10 of his fortune. His two boys, Lawrence and Horace, stayed at school in England. Recovering his money, Ellie opened a business in Shanghai, specializing in gas, land, and rubber. He invested in construction firms and transport. He believed in Shanghai's potential to grow and invested in its infrastructure, railways, mining companies, and above all, China Light and Power, which he established together with Chinese investors. The company supplied and continues to supply power to South China and to a large part of Hong Kong. But at the same time that Sir Victor Sassoon was increasing his stake in Shanghai, the Kadoories began to move some investments out of the city into Hong Kong, a British colony, as I said. They built the Repulse Bay Hotel on Hong Kong Island, followed by the Peninsula on the Kowloon side of the harbour. Kadoorie operated a tramway up to the Peak, which was an engineering marvel. He then joined the board of China Light and Power. This was the foundation of his wealth. Everything and everyone needed electricity. He bought the biggest development Hong Kong had ever seen. He built dozens of luxury homes, tennis courts, and garages for cars in Kowloon. The Sassoons sold their Hong Kong properties to the Kaduris, who ended up becoming billionaires because of it. Sadly, in 1918, a fire broke out in their house in Shanghai, and Laura Kaduri went back inside to save the nanny. Laura suffocated and died. The nanny was fine. She had already left the house. Ellie insisted that his sons join him in managing the business. Lawrence wanted to become a lawyer, but never completed his legal studies. Horace had wanted to become a farmer, but he too was drawn into managing the family firm. Sir Ellie took an active interest in his investments in diverse companies. He was a tough taskmaster and expected that jobs be done immediately, but he did accept total responsibility for them. In Shanghai, Ellie built a home for his family that was the largest estate in the city, Marble Hall. The original idea was that it should be a Jewish country club, but as the work progressed, it was obvious that the building was too grand to be a club. So Eli Kaduri made the place his own home. It boasted an elegant interior and grand Italian-style sculptures. Designed in the style of the Palace of Versailles, the Kaduri home at Marble Hall had a dining room that could seat 72, parking for the family's fleet of Rolls-Royces, and a ballroom the size of a soccer field with a ceiling 25 meters or 82 feet high. The building boasted 150 tons of Carrara marble. The length of the balcony was 220 feet long, and Michael Kaduri, Lawrence's toddler son, recalls pedaling his little car the length of the balcony. The Kaduris had come up from nothing. It was their way of announcing their arrival and showing they were influential. That was the British way. Much business was done in social settings. The fact that the Kaduris and the Sassoons ran the best hotels and gave the best parties was a way to connect with the elites. But these were deeply anti-Semitic. The Sassoons and the Kaduris decided to work with people and force them to dine with them and do deals with them, so becoming the center of social life in Shanghai. And when the aviator Charles Lindbergh flew to Shanghai, they gave a party for him. Despite his extravagance, Ellie remained altruistic. He was committed to lending out the entire house and grounds to any charitable cause, promising to defray all expenses. Thousands of visitors from all parts of the world benefited from the Kaduri's lavish hospitality. Receptions were given in honor of British officers, Zionist emissaries, diplomats, officers, and men of letters. Later, Ellie offered Marble Hall as a canteen and recreation centre to the Suffolks, one of the first British regiments to arrive in Shanghai. The Baghdadi Jews were despised by the British elite, but they considered themselves British. The Kaduris, after all, were almost one of us, as one Englishman put it. Nominally, Ellie held French citizenship. His applications to receive British citizenship were rejected time and again. Indeed, it wasn't until almost 50 years after he left Baghdad that he was granted the coveted citizenship, along with a knighthood in 1926. The Kaduris were attracted to all the trappings that befitted real English gentlemen. Like Victor Sassoon, Ellie was involved in that very British pastime of horse racing. He was a prominent figure at race meetings in Shanghai and Hong Kong. He could afford to pay for the best bred horses. The Kaduris, well, further down the street from Marble Hall, Kaduri bought a private house in 10 acres of land, demolished it, and built the resplendent, majestic hotel. It was the best and fanciest hotel in Asia until the Sassoon family built the Cathay Hotel, and the Cathay Hotel eclipsed the Majestic Hotel. In the 1930s, the Majestic was Asia's most luxurious hotel. It had the city's grandest ballroom. It was where the nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek got married. The chefs were French, the managers Swiss, the jazz musicians American. The world's celebrities would stop over in Shanghai just to spend a night there. The Kaduris and the Sassoons had contrasting attitudes to Zionism. Sir Victor Sassoon was not unduly interested in the fate of the Zionist movement. When asked if he believed that the Jews should have a state, he said he had no opinion. By contrast, Eli Kaduri felt as if he were stateless. Jonathan Kaufman writes in his book Kings of Shanghai, which I have here, he's attracted to Zionism the way so many Jews were, in that he was a man without a country. He saw Zionism as a way to protect Jews and give them the security that he personally was missing and that Jews were missing all over the world. The Kaduri family ultimately contributed much to the Zionist enterprise and even persuaded the Chinese government to support the Balfour Declaration. Eli donated land to the Jewish National Fund in order to set up a library in the Hebrew University. And the Kaduri Agricultural High School in Lower Galilee was built with funds from the estate of Eli's brother, Sir Ellis Kaduri. Funnily enough, the Palestinians have also benefited from the Kaduri's generosity. The Palestine Technical University Kaduri, formerly known as Tulkarm Community College, is an agricultural college located in Tulkarm in the northern West Bank. And the college was inaugurated in 1930. Eli Kaduri was the biggest benefactor in Shanghai's Jewish community and its de facto leader. The family were great philanthropists. In Lawrence's words, "It has been a long tradition in the Kaduri family to share their good fortune with others. My family was able to do a lot of good because we were big fish in a small pond and wanted to do more than just accumulate wealth. Of course, one can sit tight and do nothing, but then wouldn't life be boring?" One Gentile said to him, "It's good that the Lord helps the Kaduris because the Kaduris give." The family helped diaspora Jewish communities from Portugal to Pune. They sponsored hospitals, relief organizations, and schools. For instance, this school in Iraq, the Laura Kaduri School. But they also helped build schools in Iran, in Syria, in Turkey, in India, in China, and in Hong Kong. And Horace and Lawrence took over the building of the Oporto Synagogue in Portugal in memory of their parents. So the Kaduris pioneered the first schools for girls in the Middle East. And this school here, the Laura Kaduri Alliance School for Girls, was built in 1922 in Baghdad, and it educated about 1,200 girls, including my mother. The girls were taught to read and write and practical skills such as cooking and needlework. Sir Ellie's brother, Sir Ellis, also endowed schools in Hong Kong. He was a great philanthropist as well, but for some reason he doesn't seem to figure very much in the history books, and he doesn't figure in Kings of Shanghai by Jonathan Kaufman. Um, he was a great philanthropist, as I said, but he died in 1922 of a heart attack in the middle of a racing week, maybe something to do with the fact his horse hadn't won. We don't know. Sir Eli gave endowments to the Shanghai Jewish School, and he established 6 free schools for the Chinese in Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Canton. He also opened a club in Hong Kong, and there was even one named after Laura in Baghdad. And Ellie and Sir Victor were the only 2 foreigners to subscribe to the National Medical College for Chinese, established in 1937. So his philanthropy was really not restricted to the Jewish community at all. In the mid-1930s, Jewish refugees from Nazism began arriving. Shanghai was an open port and did not require an entry visa, so Eli started organizing and donating money to help the refugees. He spearheaded the relief effort, providing rooms in boarding houses. The Salvation Army, the Chinese YMCA, gave them meals and helped them find jobs. Eli urged Chinese leaders like Madame Sun, the wife of Sun Yat-sen, father of modern China, whom he knew well, to protest against anti-Jewish policies. It was only when no help came from the Americans that Eli went to Victor Sassoon for help. Victor had bought out and closed Sir Eli's majestic hotel. Victor, there is a war going on, Eli said. Stop being a playboy. We will be behind you. Horace, his son, wrote to a friend, a terrible catastrophe has come upon us all. I have lived amongst these poor refugees in Shanghai and have heard and seen for myself what they have and are going through. So Horace was a sensitive and sentimental man, more interested in humanitarian work than in business. The Kadoorie School had 700 pupils enrolled, and Horace spent more time there than running the Shanghai Gas Company. He started the Shanghai Jewish Youth Association. He funded a summer camp for the children and a special dinner and party at Marble Hall. Lawrence, who had more business skills than Horace, remained in Hong Kong. Horace never married, but Lawrence married Muriel Gabbai, also related to the Sassoons, at the Ohel Lea Synagogue in Hong Kong in 1938. When it came to helping the Jewish refugees, Sir Victor rose to the occasion. The Baghdadis shouldered the relief effort for 18,000 refugees without outside aid. It was not until 1941 that the American Joint Distribution Committee agreed to help the Jews in Shanghai. By 1939, the Japanese banned further refugees. Shanghai was running out of money and food. In December 1941, the Japanese entered the war with their attack on Pearl Harbor. Sir Victor left for India. Horace remained in Shanghai. Eli was then sick and he was sent to Hong Kong. The refugee school in Shanghai was closed, and Horace was arrested and evicted from Marble Hall. The Japanese invaded Hong Kong in 1942. They wanted Lawrence's pride, the power plant. The Kadoorie employees blew it up. Lawrence and his family were the last to escape from the Peak, but were forced into an internment camp with 2,000 other British citizens. The conditions were terrible. The internees were given one cigarette, watery rice, boiled lettuce, and a little soup daily. The shower was shared by 30 people. Ellie spent 5 months there. Aged 80, he was dying from prostate cancer. He requested permission to be allowed to return to Shanghai and move back into Marble Hall. Lawrence borrowed money to pay for Ellie's passage and that of his own family, only to find that the Japanese had imprisoned Ellie with Horace in the stables at Marble Hall. In August 1944, Ellie died. Lawrence and Muriel and their very young children were sent to a camp 7 miles away. They had to share a dormitory with another family. 8 people jammed into a space designed for 2 students. Rain came through the broken window panes. In a large, unheated room, the Japanese doled out small portions of rice the size of a cigarette packet and rotten vegetables. Inmates boiled the weevils they found in the rice for protein. Lawrence became a leader of the prisoners, organizing meetings and even washing his son's dirty nappies. The Japanese frequently punished the Kadoories and other inmates by denying them water for 2 days. In 1942, German SS members arrived in Shanghai, and there were rumors that the Jews would be exterminated. Captain Inuzuka, with whom Sir Victor Sassoon had been negotiating about the refugees, had been transferred to Manila. The butcher of Warsaw, Joseph Meisinger, arrived. Japanese were shocked by Nazi plans for forced labor and medical experiments. They never forgot that a Jewish American banker, Jacob Schiff, had helped finance their war against Russia in 1904. Rather than intern the German and Austrian refugees in camps, the Japanese decided to create a ghetto named Hongkou, formerly known as Little Tokyo. The refugees moved into squalid slums. The ghetto in Shanghai became known as Little Vienna. There were so many refugees from Germany and Austria. And in 1943, 18,000 refugees were crammed into 1 square mile, and already joining 100,000 Chinese living in abject squalor. And apparently about 2,000 refugees died. During the Japanese occupation, British nationals were interned as enemy aliens, and their possessions were sent to Chinese friends for safekeeping. The inmates were not that badly treated. There was food, although the meat was thought to be dog meat. Once the rice dished out in the internment camps was bright pink, because the bottom of the pan revealed a pair of red socks that had been hung above the stove to dry and had fallen into the pot. No one claimed ownership. The few Jewish families in the internment camp had prayers on Shabbat and even put on Purim plays and celebrated Passover. So this is Elie Kadouri's grave in Shanghai. he joined his wife, who had died in the fire at their home many years before. Apparently, only 4 Jewish graves now survive in Shanghai, and the cemetery has been destroyed or built over. So even after the war was over, Lawrence and Horace was the local representative of the American Joint Distribution Committee, played a pivotal role in ensuring the well-being of the stateless refugees. Some had to be put up in Hong Kong, generally in the Peninsula Hotel, on their way to Australia. And here is a photo of the refugees. And a makeshift dormitory, I think possibly in the Peninsula Hotel. While the nationalists and the communists wrestled for control of Shanghai, Victor Sassoon started selling his properties. In 1947, Horace left Shanghai on a plane to Hong Kong. Lawrence was already there. He flew to Hong Kong on an RAF plane. The communists seized Kadoory's Shanghai Gas Company, and 40 relatives of 22 servants in Marble Hall moved in. As they had done with Victor Sassoon's Cathay Hotel, the communists imposed such swinging taxes that they expropriated the owners, who could not afford to pay. Even Madame Sun Yat-sen, who had known the Kadourys for 30 years, did not come to their aid. She was firmly on the side of the communists, and Lawrence donated Marble Hall to her. Lawrence wrote to his brother, "I feel we must consider everything we have in Shanghai as lost." But the Kadourys still had a controlling stake in China Light and Power and controlled the Peninsula Hotels chain in Hong Kong. Their money had remained untouched in the bank, and the new reality demanded a change of approach. According to Jonathan Kaufman, the Kadourys are slow and steady. They build and ultimately surpass the Sassoons. Whereas the Sassoons make all their money early, becoming one of the richest families in the world in the 1930s, and then lose it, the Kadourys, by being more deliberate and maybe a little less impulsive, end up becoming more successful in the long term. And the family's worth today is estimated at $13 billion. And this is Lawrence Kadoory with a farmer in Hong Kong. What brought about the final divergence in the routes taken by the two families was the Communist Revolution. From the first, the Sassoons had been more successful, richer and more influential than the Kadourys, but they did not grasp the size of the threat posed by the communists in China. As a result of the revolution, which culminated in 1949, they lost their whole fortune, which had been invested first in India and then in Shanghai. As Victor Sassoon remarked, "I gave up India, but China gave me up." The irony is that in the end, the Kadourys end up much wealthier than the Sassoons, says Jonathan Kaufman. The Kadourys had moved money to Hong Kong, and in fact, at one point, when the Sassoons are leaving Shanghai and Hong Kong, people advise them to hold on to their property in Hong Kong, but they don't. Back in Hong Kong, Lawrence proceeded to help revive Hong Kong. Very soon, it was booming. There was an insatiable demand for electricity. In the 1950s and 60s, they relentlessly increased the generation and distribution of power. Horace and Lawrence Kadoory were the two most effective anti-communists, as an Australian publisher put it. And this is Lawrence Kadoorie in Hong Kong. And here is Michael Kadoorie standing next to the lady in red. The family continued to keep the channels open with the communist regime. They refrained from criticizing it in public. Your family has always been a friend to China, a senior aide to Chinese President Xi Jinping is quoted as telling Michael Kadoorie, the present head of the family. In the 1980s, the Kadoories cemented close ties with the Chinese government. They invested in a nuclear power station at Daya Bay, near the Hong Kong border. Lawrence played a significant role in the negotiations leading to the handover of Hong Kong to the Chinese government in 1997. In 2010, the Kadoories squared the circle when they built the Peninsula Shanghai. The Baghdadis were back. And here it is. Now I'm going to tell you about another Baghdadi Jew who made his money in Shanghai. His name is Silas Hardoon. One of the most unusual of Shanghai's millionaires was Silas Aaron Hardoon. Starting out as a humble clerk, Hardoon worked for the Sassoons as a night watchman and then a manager. Born in 1851, he had exceptional business acumen and made millions from property. Mao Zedong apparently was a tenant of his at one point. While the Baghdadi Jews were almost all endogamous, Silas Hardoon was unusual in his choice of wife. Lisa was the daughter of a Chinese seamstress and a French sailor. They were extremely poor at the start of their married life. Apparently, Silas only owned one shirt to wear to work, and in the sweltering humidity, he took off his shirt, and by the time he got home, it would be dry. Lisa wore the trousers in the family, so to speak. Although she was 13 years younger than her husband, she was a Buddhist who never converted to Judaism. The couple lived with monks and nuns, servants and relatives on a vast estate which had a Buddhist monastery and temples. Their house had a pagoda-shaped roof. Hardoon Road was the first paved road in the Shanghai International Concession, and a monopoly set was modelled on this. Hardoon, as you can see, Hardoon Road is highlighted at the top there, and I think it still exists today. I don't think it was renamed. Hardoon was soft-spoken and retiring. He combined extravagance. Let me just go back again. Extravagance with miserliness. He was known to sit in his office on cold days in his overcoat and fingerless gloves, a bit like Scrooge. He was an enigmatic character. Few understood his many eccentricities. His daughter Maple writes that he was a symbol of the white man's position in the Far East, a blend of all faiths and hopes, a talented man who lived his life in an exotic setting as he thought best. Although he did maintain links with the local Jews and held receptions for the Zionist movement, for instance, he was primarily interested in preserving Chinese culture and heritage and was generous in supporting local causes. For his philanthropy, he received many awards, including the highest award ever given to a foreigner. Then he had a dream in which his father appeared. He told him he was not doing enough for the Jewish community. There were 5 synagogues in Shanghai. Jacob Sassoon had already built this one, the Ohel Rachel Synagogue. Silas Hardoon donated £300,000 to build the Bet Aharon Synagogue, and that would be worth about £3 million today. 250 students of the Mir Yeshiva were to be housed there during World War II. And there you can see on the right the Mir Yeshiva boys studying in the synagogue. The Mir Yeshiva, you will recall, was evacuated from Lithuania with the aid of the Japanese diplomat Shiuge Sugihara. After the Japanese occupied Shanghai, they deported the Mir Yeshiva Bocharim to the city, and the Beth Aharon synagogue was demolished in 1985. Silas and Lisa had no children of their own, but they adopted 6 girls and 5 boys. Some had mixed Eurasian parentage. These were brought up as Jews and the boys circumcised, some at a painfully late age. They were taught Hebrew and transported everywhere by Rolls-Royce. One of the daughters, Maple Hardoon, wrote an account of this bizarre household. They were the only children in all Shanghai to observe Chinese, Jewish, and Christian holidays. This blend of culture the children found confusing. Silas Hardoon seemed to want to make sure his wife had everything she wanted. But he died in 1931 reciting the Shema. The funeral was the most bizarre imaginable. 2,000 mourners turned up. Jews, Taoists and Buddhists each performed their own rites. 100 joss-sticks surrounded the grave. All hell broke loose when it came to dividing up his inheritance. In his will, Silas Hardoon had left $650 million, in those days a massive sum, to his wife Lisa. Soon, obscure relatives in Iraq began to pop out of the woodwork to contest the will. An almighty international legal battle ensued, centered on Hardoon's citizenship. If he was British, his fortune would go in its entirety to his wife. But if he was Iraqi, she would get only a quarter of his estate. In the end, it was decided that Hardoon was British, and the UK government gleaned £500,000 in death duties. The children, however, were in limbo. When the Japanese invaded in 1942 and interned all the British citizens, they could not decide if the Hardoons were British, stateless, or Chinese. They were not interned, but spent the war on the Hardoon estate. There were other colourful characters in the Shanghai Jewish community. Many were fabulously wealthy. Israel Benjamin founded the Shanghai Jewish School and the Jewish Community Association. Edward Ezra had a high profile at home and abroad and owned a palatial home. It now houses the People's Armed Police. And that's his ballroom. Absolutely magnificent. Just a minute. Many of these families are described in Maisie Meyer's book, Shanghai's Baghdadi Jews, which I have here. And this book has 26 biographies and makes fascinating reading. It was a close-knit community. They were socially conservative and intermarried amongst themselves. There were some Sephardi Ashkenazi marriages, for instance, on the right. This is a Baghdadi girl who married a mere yeshiva bocher. The Ashkenazim were usually from Harbin. They were Russian Jews who had fled eastwards to escape pogroms at the end of the 19th century. At first, the Baghdadis frowned on marriage with them, but barriers gradually crumbled, and marriage with non-Jews was very rare, although a white Russian did marry into the Sofer family. Half of Shanghai's business was in the hands of the Baghdadis, who numbered 1,000 by 1925. They dominated the stock exchange. They all spoke Judeo-Arabic to discuss tactics. They were religiously observant and were strict in applying the laws of kashrut. But they also adopted a colonial British lifestyle, wearing Burberry coats, owning and betting on horses, hunting with the hounds. While they led charmed lives making money, let's not forget the wider context. Chaos and war swirled around them in China, where millions lived in abject poverty and deprivation. This was a time of turmoil and violence, and from time to time the brutal reality impinged on the Baghdadis' genteel lives. One such episode was the Lin Cheng outrage of 1923. It was not unusual for luxury trains to be raided and their passengers captured and held to ransom. And this was the inspiration for the 1932 film Shanghai Express, starring Marlene Dietrich. 300 passengers on a train bound for Peking were robbed and held to ransom. They were driven off to the bandits' mountain lair. Among them were 35 foreigners. Among the 35 foreigners were 3 Baghdadi Jews, Theo Safir, Frederick Sassoon Elias, and Edward Leopold Elias, described as persons of Mesopotamian origin somewhere around the Garden of Eden. They were traveling to Peking on holiday. According to Maisie Meyer in her book Baghdadi Jews of Shanghai, Frederick Elias was taken off the train barefoot, wearing only silk pajamas. Several days later, he was given a second-hand pair of trousers, socks, and slippers. Edward received a forceful blow on his shoulder from a captor's rifle, leaving him with 2 nasty open wounds. The hostages were forced to travel continuously for almost 2 weeks on what they called their Grand March. In the first 3 days, they walked, many with bleeding feet and sprained ankles, nearly 70 miles, and rode a mule for about 30 miles, often being thrown off. They were fed 2 raw eggs during the first 3 days, then a veal stew, which was actually Shandong dog, a particularly tough type of cur, they said, and scorpion tamales wrapped in dough. A well-meaning but clueless missionary tried to help by sending the hostages ham to eat and the New Testament as reading matter. In the end, the captives, who were British protégés, were released thanks to the efforts of the Western powers, and a large ransom was paid. According to George Haim's memoirs, the Elias boys invited the bandits to a banquet in Shanghai. Toasts were drunk, and all the bandits dropped dead. They had been poisoned. But I think that story was apocryphal. There are still monuments to this vibrant community. The Cafe Hotel still exists, so does Marble Hall, so does the residence of Edward Ezra. The cemeteries no longer exist. When the People's Republic under Mao Zedong was declared on the 1st of October 1949, the Baghdadi Jews, who had welcomed the Jews escaping Nazism, left as refugees themselves for Israel, for the US, for Australia. Today in Shanghai, there is once again a Jewish community, estimated at 10,000 expatriate Jews, and they are served by 13 Chabads. So I'll finish there. Just a reminder that if you want to see part one of my talk, which focused on the Sassoons, that was given on the 16th of January, and you'll be able to find it on the Lockdown University website. So thank you very much for listening. If there are any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. Whoops, just one question. Is that right?
That's what I'm seeing at the moment as well, but maybe with a couple moments, people will
Right.
add.
Here we are. There's a few more, I think, coming up. So Susan says, Yitzhak Rabin and Yigal Alon were both students at the Kaduri Agricultural School in the Lower Galilee. That's very interesting. Thank you for that. Oh, thank you, Adi. And Harbin has a cemetery, right? And thank you, Rena, for your kind words. Was opium bought and sold by the Kaduris? No, the Kaduris never dealt in opium. That was the Sassoons. I mean, the Sassoons made their money out of opium until it was declared illegal. Oh, nice to hear from Michelle, an old school friend. Thank you. And thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Daniela. And that's it. Oh, if there aren't any more questions, then, wait a minute. I think there might be one. Did you come across the Shamoons in your research? I didn't actually. No. Of course, I know the Shamoons who lived in London. And Enid says she had a friend from Shanghai who never spoke much about her background. And is the Peninsula Hotel the same as in New York and Chicago? I should imagine that they all belong to the same chain. Yes, Tessa. And thank you, Roger. And the friend from Shanghai never spoke much about her background. Well, if she was a refugee in Shanghai during the war, maybe it wasn't a very pleasant experience. Is that it? Oh, there's another question. Why was the synagogue demolished in 1985? Well, I don't know the actual specific reasons, but I should imagine that the Chinese actually demolished a lot of old Shanghai. Obviously, it was too, and also there weren't any Jews, probably. Don't forget it was under communism. And there probably are not enough Jews to go. You know, it was before Shanghai really became capitalist. And I would say that land was probably very expensive, and you know, there was a great deal of money to be had in property development. And Ruth says The Kings of Shanghai is a lovely book. Yes, I agree. The Kings of Shanghai, lovely book, very readable actually, and a great you know, introduction to these two kings, Victor Sassoon and Eli Kaduri. And they really made Shanghai into a fabulous city, which is really quite amazing when you think of it. Um, I think that's possibly it. So if there aren't any more questions, I'd just like to wish you all Chag Sameach. Have a good one. And thank you very much for joining me and for listening.
Thank you so much, Lynn, and good evening and good night to everyone.